Hello, everyone. Welcome to Imposter Coding. I am the Imposter Coder, Gary. For starters, I just wanted to thank you all for stopping by. Just a quick disclaimer, this is not a tutorial, and I'm not an actual developer. I'm just a normal guy trying to build some pretty cool stuff. Now, with that out of the way, today what I want to work on is getting ROS2 Humble installed. After we get ROS2 Humble installed, I want to test out the install by running some of the pre-built nodes provided by ROS. Most of the information that I cover, I pulled from the ROS2 documentation. The sources will be linked in the description below. Alright, with that out of the way, let's just jump right into looking at the documentation and kind of breaking this down. For me, ROS2 documentation has been actually very challenging to go through, and ROS in general has been a really tough library to try to learn. So basically, real quick, what ROS actually is, it stands for Robot Operating System. Um, although it is considered an operating system, it's actually just a library that is built with C++. You can work with it with Python, and that's actually how I'm going to be working with it, is mostly with Python. We will use multiple languages, but mostly I will be writing in Python. So if we come on down, you could see this is basically our first page for installation in the documentation. I'm on an Ubuntu system. That's what I recommend you use, just because it is going to work most efficiently, I believe, and then it's also just going to be easiest to work with the Linux system versus a Windows or a um, Mac system. And then they also recommend, if you are going to work with it on a Windows computer, that you use a virtual machine, so that way you are still working with Ubuntu. Um, so basically what we're going to do is we're going to walk right through this guide step by step. You could basically just go right through and run each line of code, and it will get it installed for you. Um, and that's basically, you don't need to run that. Um, we will run the local command as long as we are on UTF-8. We won't actually have to run any of this. This second running of the local is just to verify the settings have changed, if you need to change the settings. The second thing we're going to do is we are going to enable the Ubuntu Universe repository. The way we're going to do that is with these two commands. Then we are going to add the ROS2 GPG key with these two commands. And then we add the repository to our source list. I'm not a big Linux user, so a lot of this stuff is kind of out of my scope. It's just there, and it's needed to make the system ready for the Ubuntu, or sorry, for the Linux, or sorry again, for the ROS2 installation. Let's see this. Okay, so now after we get the repository, or after we get the repository added to the sources list, we're going to go ahead and do a system update and a system upgrade to the computer itself. And once we get that done, then we will be ready to move forward and actually install ROS2. So why don't we get to that point, and then we will go through a little more of the documentation. So I'm going to drag this actually over here out of our way. I'm going to open up a new terminal, and essentially I'm going to just start entering these commands one by one. When I run local, you can see that I'm already on the UTF-8 setting, but if this wasn't set to that, you would run the rest of the commands in this first box. You could run them anyway just to make sure, but I'm pretty confident I'm on the right setting. So I'll step down to the next command line. and that would be to um, enable the Ubuntu Universe repository. Go ahead and run that. It's going to prompt us for our password. Hopefully I don't say it out loud when I'm typing it. Alright. We're going to go ahead and... Oh yeah, that's right. Whenever I hit Control V, it does that. I can't do it on this, but on Windows you can. I'm not sure why. Um, it might be saying this because I actually ran this command once before. So I'm going to hit cancel. You shouldn't get prompt with that. It should just go right through. And then you would just actually carry on as if nothing happened. And there I go again, hitting Control C. We'll run that. This might take a second. And it wasn't too terribly bad, actually. And now we're going to add this to our sources list. That didn't take any time. We'll go ahead and do a quick update. Oh, I almost did it again. Then we will do an upgrade. Then we should be actually able to install ROS Humble. Oh, real quick, what I wanted to show you is that there's two versions, I believe, to every distribution, at least for ROS Humble. There's a desktop version, and then there's a base version. The desktop version we're going to install, being we're on an actual desktop. It's going to come with useful tools like RViz, that helps you visualize what you're working with, helps you visualize. It's more or less just a graphic user interface that's provided with ROS. If we were to use the base version, we would just get more or less the bare minimums, the bare bones. It actually says right there: communication libraries, message packages, command line tools, no graphic user interface tools. So that's going to be our biggest difference between the two. We're going to go ahead and get the desktop version. You would use this more or less on things like a Raspberry Pi, maybe an older version of a Raspberry Pi. I believe the newer ones, like the Pi 4 and Pi 5, they can handle, as long as it's an 8 gig or better, they can handle the desktop version. There I go again. And fingers crossed, it looks like it's going to go. Okay. This might take a minute just because I believe it is a pretty big package. All right, so we're coming pretty close to the end. It's going to be done here in a second. Um, so basically what we're at is we just installed ROS. Moving forward, more or less what we're going to have to do every time that we use ROS moving forward is we're going to have to source our environment, um, in order to be able to use the packages and nodes and all that stuff that is given to us or that we develop ourselves via ROS. Um, and then here are the two example nodes that I was hoping to test out and run. We'll go through that in just a second. Oh, it looks like this is actually still going. So with that said, I'm going to show you one more thing that we're going to actually do, before we're all said and done, provided that we get these going and working correctly. Um, because realistically, running this command every time you open a new terminal, as you can see down here, we open new terminals and we run the source command in every terminal that we open. That can be a little bit inconvenient, so we don't lose our place. I'm going to actually open a new window. Again, the documentation for ROS is a little bit tricky, and I do have trouble navigating it sometimes. But I do know, I believe what we want to do is we come down to maybe the how-tos. We're looking for configure. We need to configure our source, I believe, is the actual link I'm looking for. Um, so what we want, oh, configure environment, that's what I want. So if we come to configure environment, you can read through this, and actually, if you're looking right here, it does say that we're working with a slightly older version of ROS, and there is a newer version of ROS out called Jazzy. I will tell you why I'm not using Jazzy in just a second. But if we scroll down here, more or less, it references that source line that we have to enter into the terminal every time we open a new terminal. Gets to be kind of a pain. Well, in the directory, there's a bash RC file, and that's like a startup file that runs every time you open your terminal, I believe. And long story short, what we want to do is we want to add that source line to the very end of that script, so that way every time we open our terminal, it'll actually source ROS for us. We could do that in Linux right through the command line conveniently by just echo in quotations the line that we want to add to the file, and then we more or less direct it to the file, the path in the file that we want to add the line to. So with that said, let's just check up the progress. Okay, so that's done. If we jump, oh, and real quick, just since I brought it up, the reason why I didn't want to use Jazzy is because when I got to the on a previous attempt, when I got to, let's see, the actual installing of ROS Jazzy Desktop, it wouldn't even find the package. Again, another reason why I'm not a big fan of their documentation. You could follow the documentation and still have issues. So with that said, I want to go ahead and keep moving forward. We should be actually good to go. What I want to do real quick is if I think we hit ROS, let's see what happens. I'm not sure. ROS command not found. And that's because we never sourced it. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, if we were to actually run that source command and source the ROS humble file, now if we type in ROS, we get nothing. It's because we're supposed to type in ROS2. Just to prove my point, if you don't run it, so if we don't run that source command in a new terminal at this point, if you hit ROS2, it's going to say command not found. Whereas if we hit ROS2 over here, we get our help menu that you're used to seeing. I'm assuming at this point, if you're working with ROS2, you know a little bit about the command line, you know a little bit about development, so you're used to seeing this help window. So with that said, now we can be pretty confident that we actually have ROS2 installed. So with that said, I'm going to actually open up another terminal. Can I split these terminals? Let's see, can I want to try to have, okay, there we go. I want to try to have them side by side. I'm sure you can, I just haven't figured it out yet, how to split these terminals up. I'm sure Linux, you can do it. So with that said, let's jump over here, hit clear. We know that we have our source file ran here. Let's go ahead and source ROS into this terminal. So now we have both of our terminals running. What we're going to do now, I'm going to actually drop this down here like so we can have our documentation. and our terminals all on the same page. Um, what we're going to do is we're going to run these example nodes. So this is a talker and listener node. So more or less what we're going to do is just run this command right here in one terminal, and then in the other run this command. So what we're essentially doing and what ROS is going to do is in one node it's going to be a what they call a publisher, and it's going to send out, I guess you could say, a message or a signal on a specific channel, and that channel in ROS they refer to as topics, and other nodes that are listener nodes can tune into those topics, and then they can receive the message that the publisher is sending. That might have lost you, so let's go ahead and just see if we can't visualize what I'm talking about. So we run this in this window, ROS2 run demo nodes CPP talker. So what this is saying, more or less, is just this says C++ talker node. So what this node is doing is every, I guess, second is publishing hello world, and then it's counting the seconds that this node has been running. Now, if we run the same thing, or not the same thing, because actually this is going to be a Python listener, so you can see that Python and C++ can actually work together. If we run that over in this node, we can see that this is now listening on that same topic, and we're receiving real-time communications between the terminals. So essentially this node is publishing on a specific channel, hello world, and this integer, and this is tuned into that channel and receiving that signal. I heard hello world, published hello world. So one of the things that you get with the desktop version is RTQ graph, I believe it is, and that's going to also help us visualize what's going on here. So let's go ahead and open a new window. Put that over here, and I believe it's RTQ. And that will be line number 4. So sudo app update, sudo app install, and then I guess that's really all we would need to do. So I'm going to go ahead and stop these two nodes. The way you're going to stop them is with Control C, and that'll stop the two nodes. Please, you could also note that you don't need a publisher node for a listener to run. So I mean, realistically, this can run, and you can see that it will just sit there idle, and it won't do anything until we activate a talker node. But once the talker node is fired up, it will run, and then if the talker node shuts down, it will just sit and it'll wait for a signal to come again. So real quick, what we're going to go ahead and do, I'm going to type in clear into both of these terminals just to clean them up. I am going to open one more again, because we are essentially going to want all three open anyway. And just for the sake of argument, we'll go ahead and run these two commands. Shouldn't really need the update, but for the sake of argument, we will go through the process. And that's kind of a unique way to install something from my perspective, but it's what it says to do, so fingers crossed. Yes. And it looks like this might take a second as well, so we can actually move this over here. Let's get these two nodes fired back up. Got our talker running, and we got our listener running. Okay, so now it just says all we should have to do is run RQT, and source. I'm wondering if we gotta run that source command again. Okay. So yeah, note after you install RQT, you actually do have to either open a new terminal or well yeah, we never actually echoed that into our bash file, that this source line into our bash file. We haven't done that yet. That's why I had to run our the bash or the source command in order to be able to run RQT. So now that we have this open, we have our two nodes running. What I really wanted to do was show you how you can use this to view. Oh, here we go, node graph. I'm pretty sure this is what we want. Okay, here we go. Yep. So yeah, basically what we have is our talker node right here. This is our topic or our channel, which is called chatter. And our listener subscribes, which is actually what that's called. This is, I think, a subscriber. It subscribes to the chatter channel or topic, which is published by the talker. But that's basically it. Again, keep in mind, I'm not actually a developer. I'm not. I didn't go to school for this. I'm mostly self-taught. And when it comes to ROS2, I am completely green. Other than reading the documentation, I'm pretty much just going through this for the first time. So we're going to learn this together. But that would be pretty much it for today. So with that said, I would like to thank you for tuning in. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. If you want to see where this build goes, please hit the subscribe button. So that way you'll be notified every time I post a new video. Because I do have a lot planned for this channel, and any support would be greatly appreciated. Until next time, have a good one.